Good morning. It is day 4. Wow, day 4 already of our devotionals. And as always, I'll get us started off with prayer. Good morning, God. It is so good to be in your presence. Thank you for allowing that to even be possible, for making yourself known to us. I pray that you would speak just like any other day, but more clear, in a more powerful way, in a way that we know is your voice and your voice alone. Speak through me to touch each of these ladies just where they need it and just what they need to hear. It's in your name I pray. Amen. So I don't know if you guys have experienced beats of snow yesterday, but I did, and my body is just itching to get out. Yes, I was outside shoveling, but I'm just like itching to get out and move. And when you've gotten little tastes of sunshine, come on, how are you going to do that to me? The birds are confused, and I'm confused, and everybody's confused. So, got a little Shakeology on my laptop. Okay, moving on. So, how are each of you doing? I'm so happy to see you engaging. Heads up, I will be contacting each of you individually through Facebook Messenger just to do a little one-on-one check. So keep a lookout for that. So I love how Shauna starts off this chunk of these chapters with what she, like the very first paragraph on page 48. She says, "The word that changed everything, of course, is no. I'd been saying yes and yes and yes, indiscriminately, haphazardly, resentfully for years. And I realized all at once that I'd spent all my yeses, and in order to find peace and health in my life, I needed to learn to say no." Wow. If you're someone that people frequently depend on, they will freak out if you start to say no. And guess what? That is okay. So in this business, we have like what we call team calls with other business owners. And something that we focused a lot on this past week was what to do with no's, because a huge portion of the job is reaching out to people, as I reached out to each of you. And the downfall to constantly doing that is you never know how people are going to respond. And I'm so thankful. I cannot reiterate it enough how I am so thankful that you each have said yes and essentially took a risk on me as a new coach. But reality is not everyone is willing to take that risk. And so this business has already been very challenging to my emotional state because it's tempting to get really down when someone says no. But I've come to realize that in the reverse, it's also important for me to say no. And I don't just mean this in regards to the business, but in all aspects of life. If you are someone who is highly dependable on, like people can depend on you, reliable, you're very organized, on top of things, and in general, you are just very precise and disciplined and professional, like people are going to come to you naturally. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to you that when you do start to say no, people are kind of taken back, like, well, wait, she normally says yes to me, so why is she all of a sudden saying no? But reality is, like, we can't help the entire world. So the way I look at it is through this domino effect. Because if we can't help the entire world, then why do we continue to pretend to do so? So this domino effect takes the approach that I'm going to help the few in my close circle, you ladies. And then through these 3 weeks of working together, my intent would be I teach you how to help those in your close circle, therefore creating the domino effect. And by me passing on what I've learned to teach you, to teach others, like it creates this larger impact that then eventually the world would be helped. And I think that that is true, not just, with Beachbody. Like, let's put the topics of Beachbody aside and just look at it in light of the gospel. If I share what God is teaching me to those around me, instead of thinking about the masses, like, I believe in evangelism and I think it definitely has its place. I'm not knocking that, but all I'm saying is, for me, as one who has the mission mindset of the backyard, like, I'm going to focus on the few that I know care deeply about what I have to share with them, rather than think so far outside of my realm and then set myself up for disappointment, essentially, when it's not accomplished in the way that I want it to look or the timing I want it to be in, etc. So for me, looking at the domino effect takes a huge weight off my shoulders and gives me this feeling that I am allowed to say no. And instead, if, like, previously I'd think, oh, if I don't say yes, then I'm robbing that person out of their opportunity to be blessed or something for that sort. Oh, and this reminds me, so I don't know if it was a comedian. I think the comedian Michael Jr., he came to my church in Pittsburgh, and he spoke about, like, walking on the streets and seeing a homeless person. And I mean, that we can go down a whole line of discussion regarding how you feel about the homeless and everything like that. Like, I'm very opinionated when it comes to that, but that's not the point to this story. He said, like, I walked by a homeless person, gave them some money, no big deal. Didn't know what that person was going to do with it, etc., etc. He said, but what about consulting God, like going before him before doing something quote unquote good? Like, okay, you want to give money to someone who is in need. Great. Like, I'm sure the intentions of your heart are in the right place, etc. But what if there was a person, a pedestrian behind you who God needed to use to bless that homeless person, but yet you took that opportunity away from the person behind you walking because you just mindlessly had the money and said, boom, give it. And so there's even yet another concept of saying no. Like, no is, like, framed in such a way that it's negative all the time. Like, there's a negative connotation associated with it, and that doesn't necessarily need to be the case or have to be the case. So I hope that kind of, like, helps to preface this saying no. It is something that I'm not yet very confident in or comfortable with, but am learning gradually, and this business is helping that for sure. Shauna goes further on to say on page 49, you can't have a yes without no. Another way to say it, if you're not careful with your yeses, you start to say no to some very important things without even realizing it. In my rampant of yesing, I said no without intending to. No to rest, no to peace, to groundedness, to listening, to deep and slow connection, built over years instead of moments. All of my yeses brought me to a shallow way of living, an exhausting, frantic lifestyle that actually ended up having little resemblance to that deep, brave yes I was searching for. On that same page, she says at the very bottom, I don't know a way to remake anything without first taking down the existing structures. That's what no does. It puts the brakes on your screaming fast life and gives you a chance to stop and inspect just exactly what you've created for yourself, as difficult as that may be. So here's where the topic that we've been discussing, time, intersects with the concept of saying no. And I think that this really shows us that no's are necessary, and that it doesn't matter how awkward or gut-wrenching they'll be or feel to us in the beginning, they are necessary. I think saying no will allow us to implement the topics of time and rest that we've talked about in such a way that if we say no more, I am more than willing to bet that we will experience more time and more rest. So the way I look at that is, if someone presents an opportunity to you and you're so impulsively ready to say yes to it, rather than like sitting back and taking the time to think through and process what's just been asked of you. I mean, I know within the church and the community of believers, it's very tempting when given an opportunity to say, oh, well, let me pray about it. And that's like pulling the Jesus card. And I'm not saying that that's bad, but I choose to shy away from those things just because I think it is very cliche. Like, if I genuinely feel as though I need to pray about something because I just got done saying, pray about every decision you make, I will do so, but that's not going to be my typical answer, like, oh, well, let me pray about this, because people just respond to that in a way that's the same as responding like, I'm a Christian. Oh, well, good for you. Like, there are also a ton of people who wear cross necklaces. Like, does that just make you a Christian? So I don't want to get into hot potato debate topics, but I'm just saying, for me personally, like, to say you're going to pray about it, great. Pray about it, but are you actually going to pray about it, or are you just going to say you're going to pray about it so that we can end the discussion? Because that's not authentic, that's not realistic. Like, just tell me how it is. If you want it to be a no, then let it be a no. So saying no comes with a price, because not everyone's going to understand, especially after years of saying yes. So my challenge to you, which is actually a tip that I gave on our Beyond Bethany Building family Facebook page just the other day, is to let your yeses be yes and your nos be no. To confidently, sternly, authentically, and gracefully give either or answer. Yes, I believe that all of those descriptive words can go together with a yes or a no. And without any of those four, rather, I think your yes or your no can be left in the gray, and this perhaps might be a good area where we want black and white. I know that if I am feeling uneasy about a conversation I've had with someone recently, I am so confrontational that I'll say, like, is this what you meant, or is this what you meant? Especially because I'm also prone to assumptions and to reading in between the lines that aren't even there, because I'm assuming that there's lines. So I am so good at assuming that I assume. Crickets, because I hope that made sense. Yeah, that's where I'm at. Vulnerable moment. Shauna puts her input in dealing with no on page 50. She says, draw close to people who honor your no, who cheer you on for telling the truth, who value your growth more than they value their own needs getting met or their own pathologies celebrated. Like, those who have honored the boundaries I've set have gained a deeper respect for me. And that's where I'll leave that. She ends the chapter with some insight towards someone like myself who really struggles with thinking that my no is always going to have to last forever. Like, okay, well, no's are great, but I'm really uncomfortable with them. So she said, no won't always be the word you use most often. I hate that for a season, no had to be the answer to almost everything. And for me, it's when I'm in school. But over time, when you rebuild a life that's the right size and dimension and weight, full of the things you're called to, emptied of the rest, then you do get to live some yes again. But for a while, no is what gets you there. And I love that last part. No is what gets you there. Meaning no, saying no is what gets you to your yes. So just to backtrack a little bit, if you say yes to something, you say no to something else. And that is so true. Like if you say yes to being present with your family, you're saying no to texting on your phone. If you say yes to driving, you say no to texting on your phone, or you should. Speaking to myself. So I hope that kind of makes sense with that topic. Practice your no's. So the first question is, what is it that you specifically need to say no to right now? If you're anything like me, you get that the sense of saying no will disappoint someone. Well, Shauna says on page 52, some people are very uncomfortable with the idea of disappointing anyone. They think that if you are kind, you'll never disappoint anyone. They think that if you try hard enough, if you manage your time well enough, if you're selfless enough, prayerful enough, godly enough, you'll never disappoint anyone. I fear these people are headed for a rude awakening. I know this because I was one of those people. For so many years, I was deeply invested in people knowing that I was very competent, capable, and a responsible person. I needed them to know that about me, because if that was true about me, I believed, I would be safe and happy. If I was responsible and hardworking, I would be safe and happy. Whoa, that's like so true for me. I wouldn't call myself a people pleaser, but I definitely want to always be perceived as someone who is on top of things, is very professional, very put together, and articulate. I've been told many times that I am so good at self-reflecting that I articulate myself very well, but that comes with a fault of talking too much, which I'm doing right now. So it is inevitable that there will be people we disappoint, even if we are doing our absolute best not to disappoint them. So why would this be then? Light bulb. It's because we are human. That is why we will disappoint. So I need to be reminded of this, because I'm like, well, if there's something else I could do to avoid disappointing people, then why not do it? Like, I would do that. Just give me the solution to avoid issues. Now, I'm a confrontational person, so if there is an issue, I won't lay my head on the pillow to go to sleep at night before solving that, forgiving, asking for forgiveness, and etc. But at the end of the day, like, if I could avoid disappointing people, I would do it. But we just can't. In order to disappoint well, if you get what I mean by saying that, like, I think there would be a good way to do it and a poor way to do it. And in order to do it well, I believe we need to do what Shauna says on page 53. We need to have a sense of God's deep, unconditional love and a strong sense of your own purpose. Without these two, you'll need from people what is only God's to give, and you'll give up on your larger purpose in order to fulfill smaller purposes or other people's purposes. And I mean, when you think about the imperfectly imperfect and God being the provider of wholeness, I think you are able to gain a perspective of like, okay, I can't do this on my own without God. I can't say no to others in a graceful way without God. Like, He is the source of all of these things, that being grace, confidence, authenticity. So why separate ourselves from him in order to achieve something that we're incapable of doing on our own in the first place? Why I would do anything, not just say no, without him is beyond me, but yet I still struggle. And again, that's a part of being human. So here's where time and saying no intersect. So if we give ourselves time to stop and think and reflect, then we'll be less inclined to impulsively say yes so often, and instead we will be able to practice saying no in a way that we believe will come across very maturely, respectfully. And I've had to have this conversation so many times where, like, you can only affect the way that you deliver something. You cannot determine how it will be received. That's up to the other party. And this is something that my family members very much so struggle with, that I'm constantly reminding them of, like, look, this is how I intended this comment to come across, out of love. But at the end of the day, if they're still going to cry, if they're going to still get a temper, if they are going to, et cetera, that's not on me. Like, I did my part. And vice versa. If they say something out of good intentions, but I took it a certain way, that's not on them. The way I react is not on anyone else but me. So how can I deliver my no's in such a way that it doesn't trigger or catalyze such types of reactions that are very emotionally based, but cause more conflict than resolution? Because that is not the goal for me. So here's a truth bomb. There is a difference between forsaking relationships and speaking the truth about our limitations. I am literally needing to do this with family members as we speak, all the time, and it's not easy. So, how do you set boundaries out of love? That's my second question to you. How do you set boundaries out of love? To help us grasp our imperfections, on page 55, Shauna says, we will disappoint people because we're limited. We have to accept the idea of our own limitations in order to accept the idea that we'll disappoint people. I have this much time. I have this much energy. I have this much relational capacity. And it does get easier. The first few times I had to say no were excruciating, but as you regularly tell the truth about what you can and can't do, who you are and who you're not, you'll be surprised at how people will cheer you on, and frankly, how much less you'll care when other people don't. Ooh. Like, her sassiness is so relatable to me. I think that's why I really appreciate her writing. I'm like, yes, hunty, get it. But I just personally really relate to that and feel encouraged by it, because it allows me to embrace my humanness and not put too high of expectations on myself, because I do that on the regular and it's natural. In this last part, or in the last chapter of part 1, she discusses the meaning of getting away. It is sort of like that spiritual high thing I talked about when you go on a church retreat or you're at a Christian concert and there's this sense of feeling like you're just so free and nothing else matters. You turned off all technology and you've escaped the realms of all communication with every human being on the face of the planet, and it's just you and God. Like, nothing sounds better. Actually, I do need people. I'm a very extroverted introvert, if that makes sense. But the point is, when you have those moments where it's just you and God, like, why do they have to be vacation associated? Like, why can't they become part of our regular? And the concept of living this way in such peace and serenity with God on a daily basis seems too distant to be realistic. Or if you're skeptical like me, if it did become reality, how could I be sure that it would last, and especially last in an authentic way? I will admit that I am super skeptical, like would err on the side of pessimistic, glass half empty kind of person. And I don't take pride in any of those attributes. I simply just embrace them and actively work against them. But I think in order to improve who I am and to grow more mature in Christ, like I first need to embrace and accept the fact that I am who I am. So Shauna states on page 59, I had the sense, let me find where that's at. On page 59. Where is it? I should have just I'm sorry. Sorry. This was like a super important part. Oh, I was looking at the wrong page. Okay. Don't screenshot that part, please. I had the sense that my essential self, my best self, was slipping away, and the new person in her place was someone I very much didn't want to be. She was shaped out of necessity, tough and focused enough to bear the weight of my work life when the real me, tender and whimsical, would have crumbled under her weight. Ugh, that is so good. So reflecting back on the topic of wholeness that we've previously discussed, I personally have found that my best self is something I am prone to lose, whether that be through the current life situation I'm in, finances, relationships. Like I just find I lose my best self all the time. But like wholeness, I think Jesus is the only answer to me being my best self, to you being your best self. So question number 3 would be, what would it take for you to become your best self today? Page 61, she says, the more I listen to myself, my body, my feelings, and the less I listen to the should and must and to do voices, the more I realize my body and spirit have been whispering all along. But I couldn't hear them over the chaos and noise of the life I'd created. I was addicted to this chaos, but like any addiction, it was damaging to me. Ugh. Like, do you ever have those facepalm moments? Because I'm like, I did this. Yuck. Open up to interpretation. In this current season, something I've found to be true and have been reminded of on a daily basis is that faith is not logical. I'll say that again. Faith is not logical. Why have I ever thought that faith should be or would be logical? So, an example that I'm currently in right now, like I've said yes to something that requires me to move, like physically pick up all my things again and move from my hometown to another town. But I have no place to live. And a friend of mine texted me tonight or this morning and said, "Oh, so do you have a home?" And I was like, "No." And as I sat there and texted that, I thought to myself, I really am trusting in God more than I found myself capable of ever doing before. Yet if I'm acting out of faith through the discernment and wisdom that God has given me through his word and through prayer, then who am I or is anyone else to judge what he asks me to do? And this friend of mine, she's a sister to me, and I know that she wouldn't take this personally, me saying all of this, but like, I too have questioned why God would want me to do something that doesn't make sense. Like financially, how does this make sense? none of what I'm facing right now makes sense financially, and all I can see are the dollar signs. So, hear me. Faith is not logical. Whatever you are facing right now that you are asking God to give you the faith for, just keep pressing. Keep pressing. So, faith, oftentimes the steps behind it don't make sense, but isn't that why it's called faith? Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see." Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and the assurance about what we do not see. Father, thank you for this time that we've had to share this morning. Thank you for using Shauna Niequist to speak such truths into so many lives who have picked up this text and have read it. I thank you for giving it to me to use as the material for this grace camp. And God, I now ask that the words spoken of us over us would be brought into light of your word, in light to the conversations that we have with you and with one another, and that you would continue to confirm whatever it is that you have to speak to us this day, God. Protect us in each of our separate journeys as we go about our routines and our jobs and school and family and friendships and relationships, Lord, and just bring us back together safely into your arms once again tomorrow to join hands as we walk this journey together with our faith and our fitness. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I hope that you were blessed today. As always, if you have any questions at all, I'm here for you. I believe in you. I support you fully. You've got this. I'll talk to you soon.